Hello and welcome to another edition of It's About Money. I'm Nanette Nokan. Thank you for joining us. One of the major purchases we make is buying a vehicle. A house is next, but vehicle we buy a lot more during our lifetime. And today we are very fortunate to have a special guest, Kitty Van Boordel. People know her just by Kitty. And we're excited to have her here with us today to talk about the process of car buying. Thank you for being here, Kitty.
Well, thank you for having me, Nanette.
Really appreciate it. Now, one of the things that people are afraid to do is buy a car. I think we were talking about earlier that women generally take a man with them to purchase a vehicle. But the process that you take is different than that, but then people still think that going to a car dealership is something that they need to be afraid of. Talk to us about what goes on in a dealership, what makes you unique in the way you sell vehicles and so on.
Well, we have one price selling at the dealership, and I think that takes a lot of the fear out of it, because the philosophy at our dealership is to have a customer come in. We give them all the information that we feel is necessary for them to make an intelligent decision. And then if they decide to buy that day, that's great, but we recognize that it's such an important decision that people really need to and feel more comfortable taking that information home, talking to other people about it, and then spending time comparing maybe with other makes and models. And then when they're ready, coming back and then making the purchase. In a traditional car dealership, what happens is that the dealer becomes very afraid that if they give you a price or they give you the information, that what's going to happen is you're going to just take that to the next dealership, and if you can beat the deal by $50 or $100, that you will just buy there. So that's the reason that most car dealers don't want to give you a price, because they're afraid that you're going to use that as ammunition against them to get a better price. But again, at our dealership, we just have the feeling that, first of all, that it's unreasonable to expect a person to walk into a dealership, make a decision like that quickly. And secondly, we feel as though we can give them a pleasant enough experience that they'll really want to come back to our dealership.
So also the education part, giving them time.
Yeah, it's definitely more of an educational experience than I think you would get in most car dealerships. Mm-hmm. Also, most car dealerships pay their salespeople on a percentage of what of the profit that salesperson is able to make on the consumer. Mm-hmm. So obviously, I think it's really important that consumer knows that the salesperson is not your friend, because the more money that he makes, the more money that he can make on you, the more money that he makes for himself. So I think that it's really important that the customer knows that. Sure,
absolutely. Well, that's an interesting perspective, because you're right. The more you pay for the vehicle, the better off the salesman is.
Absolutely.
And so if it's not in that kind of, the pressure is gone, in other words, for the salesperson to sell that car immediately that day and for you to make a quick decision.
Yes, and many salespeople, as I'm sure in many businesses, every salesperson or many salespeople really need to make that sale that day, and they have that fear, and that's the thing. And we really we don't work out of any fear. We have a philosophy: if we'll give you the price, it's one price, and if you can find a better price someplace else, we feel badly that you didn't buy the car from us, but there isn't that fear that, oh my gosh, they're going to get a better price someplace else, because we've tried to put our price, the lowest possible price we can, and still stay in business and still pay our people, yet at the same time make enough money that we can, as I say, we can survive, but at the same time not have a price that is easily beaten by another car dealership.
Sure, I'm with you. Now, when buying a car, what are some of the things people ought to think about? Like for me, when I buy a car, it looks nice, and what color I'm going to buy. That sounds so stereotypical of women, but that's just the way. I mean, the safety is an issue too. But what types of things do people need to think about, prepare themselves before they walk into a dealership?
Well, when you say prepared, I think that's the most important thing. What usually happens to people is they decide they want to buy a car, so the first thing they do is they want to go out and look. But there's so much manipulation that happens in most car dealerships. It's really important for the customer to really be prepared before they walk in. Number one, they need to go to the website. And of course, the internet's been such a wonderful tool for consumers as far as buying a car, because all the information they really need to make a decision is right on the website. All the information on the make, the model, the rating with Consumer Reports, and all the other price guide and consumer price guides, so you can get the price, the rebates, all the information you need as far as pricing and equipment is right there. You can also get a pretty good idea of what your trade is worth before you walk in. So you really need that ammunition before you go into the dealership, because then you can decipher between what is fact and what's fiction once you walk into the dealership. I think the biggest misconception that people have, and it's very interesting to me, is that most people feel as though the one strength or the one piece of power that they have is negotiating what their trade is worth. Interestingly enough, when you walk into a car dealership, the used car manager goes out and he looks at your trade. And that trade actually has a cash value. And wherever you go, pretty much throughout the city, everyone is going to look at that car or truck at about that same cash value. But what happens is it gets murky, because what you really have control over is the price you pay for the new vehicle. The difference between the window sticker and actually what the car costs the dealership. And that's really the variable that the consumer should be working on, and not as concerned about what they're getting for their trade. But what happens is, because there's such a large difference between the actual window sticker and what you can pay, and that amount of money gets mixed in with the trade, that's where I think the consumer sometimes gets confused. So the idea is to walk into a dealership, not let the customer know that you, not let the dealer know that you have a trade. Negotiate your very best price on the vehicle you're interested in. Get that price down as low as you possibly can. Then bring the trade in, so that they don't get mixed up amongst themselves, because the trade really has a definite cash value. And the reason I say that is because every car dealer has to be in a position where if they have too many of these trades coming in, they can just take them to the auction and cash them. They may turn around and fix them up and retail them. But even if they do that, they want to always be in a position, if they have too much inventory, they can cash it.
Got it.
So that price of your trade-in is a lot more consistent than I think the average consumer understands.
I see. So one can look up it in the internet, the Kelley Blue Book value of a car.
Yes.
And come in with that price in mind, but then still start negotiating with the dealer on the price that they're buying, like you said, before bringing in the trade-in.
But as an example, if you think that you can retail your vehicle, your used car vehicle, for $9,000, and the cash value is actually only $7,000, which is and when I say cash value, that's the amount that the dealer can actually get for the car from a wholesaler, not retailing it, but the actual cash value. But you're thinking your car's worth $9,000, but the window sticker is $20,000, and you can actually buy it for $17,000, and they take that $3,000 and add it to the $7,000 and give you $10,000. You think you've really gotten a good deal, but actually, you haven't.
If you paid $20,000 for the car,
yes.
Okay.
Yes. So you got to get that $20,000 down as low as you can get it first.
Okay.
And then bring the trade in. That's the smartest way to buy a car.
Oh, that's a great secret.
Yeah.
But then in your dealership, you don't even have to worry about negotiating down the $20,000.
We lower the price down first.
Right.
And we let the customer know what the cash value is. Sometimes that's really painful for the customer.
Yes. I guess they always feel like what you have is worth more.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
But the secret, obviously, then is to always look at the bottom line.
Okay.
If one dealer can tell you your trade is worth a lot more than what we might tell you, but it's always that bottom line that's important. Actually, and we tell customers, we actually work wholesale to wholesale rather than retail to retail.
I see. Okay. Now, what about the deals where people come in? Usually, people generally feel good about, oh, I got my car mats for free. I mean, is that really worth putting in the mix, or does that dilute the negotiating process? I mean, usually friends say, oh yeah, I got the net for the car for free or something like that. Just feeling like they got something out of the deal regardless of how much the value is.
Well, you can go and buy floor mats at Kmart for $10.
Right, I know. Well,
I
that's
think
the
you're
funny
really
part.
better off to stick with just the car and the truck and the trade, and let all that other stuff go by the wayside. Free oil changes, for instance, are popular.
Sure.
But if you read the fine print, often you have to do every single maintenance at that dealership in order to get that free oil change. Well, that can be really costly if you can find another service center where you might be able to do a little bit better deal. Now, obviously, I think that it is important with some things to bring it to the car dealership, but there's often a catch, is what I'm trying to say.
Sure. So don't let that smaller item drag the bigger negotiation and the pricing. Yeah, I'm with you. You're absolutely right. You can get that from a retail store at an inexpensive price.
That's right.
Now, what about the relationship between where you're buying the car and where the car is being serviced? Is it important to? My husband's like a fanatic about that. You make sure that you go to the dealer that sells that car and get it serviced there, because otherwise you might have some parts or whatever else. Forgive me for being ignorant about cars. But
that's okay.
What would that is that important in your mind?
Well, it's difficult for me to sit here and tell you not to go to the
course,
dealer
yes.
for service. I think there are some really great reasons to go to the dealer, and I'm going to talk to you about those first, and then I can talk to you about some reasons why you may not always have to. I think that's probably the fairest thing to do. It's been my experience when a customer has a solid service record at the dealership and the car is out of warranty, the manufacturer will often, more times than not, give the customer goodwill service, even though the car is out of warranty, if the car has a solid service history at the dealership. And that can be very significant. For instance, with a Subaru, if you have 80,000 miles on your Subaru, and your warranty is, with a Subaru, the warranty is 60,000 miles. If you have 80,000 miles on your Subaru and your engine blows up, which fortunately doesn't happen too often with a Subaru, but it can happen. And the manufacturer, and I call the manufacturer, I call Subaru and I said, listen, this customer was expecting to get 150,000 miles on this car, it only has 80,000 miles. The first question the manufacturer will ask me is, what kind of service have they done at the dealership? And if they have a solid service record, they've done their maintenance at 30,000, they've done their maintenance at 60,000, they've been consistent with oil changes, the manufacturer will contribute, usually 50, 75%. And on an engine which can be $7,000 or $8,000, that's significant.
Sure, absolutely.
If I open that service folder and they haven't been into the dealership, I don't have a leg to stand on.
Sure, good point.
So in the long run, I think it's extremely important from that standpoint. Now, do you need to do every single maintenance on your car and bring it back to the dealership? I don't think so. Obviously, at most car dealerships today, cars are very complicated. There are all kinds of sensors and computer equipment, and the training involved in getting these technicians up to speed to actually be able to physically work on these cars is tremendous. So there are a lot of things where actually, frankly, you don't have a choice, because unless you've had specific training on a particular vehicle, no one else is going to be able to do the work. Oil changes, I think if I would rather see you do a consistent oil change every 3,000 miles, and if you can't get to the dealership, just get it done, than not do it, obviously. The other thing that I think is probably the most important part of having a car service that most people do not do is a transmission service. It's something you don't think about and no one talks about. But a transmission service at 30,000 miles and at 60,000 miles is extremely important. And I think a transmission service should be done at a car dealership. It's a little bit tricky, and I think that to be able to put the Subaru filters and the right transmission fluid back in that car is important. Tires, I think that you can have tires put on someplace else, although usually most dealerships today have tires that are so competitive because they want to bring you in for the other services. So, but I guess the bottom line would be, obviously there are really great reasons to bring your car into the dealership for service. But just keep having it serviced, regardless of what you do, because the biggest problem that consumers have later on is by not maintaining the car properly, it does not last as long, and obviously the trade-in then isn't as good.
Right.
So,
thanks for sharing that. It's important. You're right to have the record, the history of the maintenance record, because if you have no way of knowing if the customer actually, the car owner actually got their oil and filter changed at a regular basis, and they come back to you and say there's a problem, but if they hadn't been doing the work that they needed to get done on the car on a regular basis, then what do? You can't really help very much.
I recently had a customer whose engine blew up. And is very, very upset about it. So I went back through, and I could see that he didn't have an oil change in 20,000 miles from our dealership. So I called him up and I said, have you had an oil change done? 20,000 miles. I mean, that will blow up an engine. And he said, oh yes, I had an oil change done at such and such a place. And I said, do you have a receipt? No. Can you get me a receipt? Called the place, they didn't have the record. Now he's sure he had it done. But because of that, I wasn't able to get him the warranty done. I wasn't able to get him warranty done on his car. So even if you do have work done elsewhere, keep your receipts. Keep a log, a written log, and that will really help you to keep your warranty up, and then obviously also to get warranty after the warranty is actually up.
Sure. It sounds to me like the easiest way, though, is to go to the dealership and just have them keep the records, well, and not have to worry about searching for receipts from.
We do keep great records. Yes, we do. And the question is always, geez, is it more expensive? It is a little bit more expensive, but you do have the benefit of those trained technicians, and to me, I think that's really important.
Sure, I'm with you. Let's take a break. We're talking to Kitty Van Bordel, owner of Subaru and Ford dealership, right, here in Rochester, New York, and we're talking to you about buying a car and the finances that deal with that.
Rainbow, my pot of gold, your daddy's little girl till heaven hold.
It's easy to tell if you've had way too many. But what if you've had just one too many? Buzz driving is drunk driving.
You buy disposable and overpackaged products for your home, you're really saying, I'm fine with depleting natural resources. Pollute our air and water. Energy? Wasted. People tell you, hey, go for less packaging. Check out reusables. Buy stuff in bulk. Well, you tell them, no thanks. I'd rather throw it all away. Buy smart, waste less, save more.
Welcome back. I'm Nanette Nokan, where it's about money. We're talking to Kitty Van Bordel about buying a car. And so far we've talked about preparing for buying a car, and also doing your homework, going to the internet, knowing the trade-in value of your car, but also knowing the price of the car, and focusing on the lowest price you can get for that car before you discuss your trade-in. And then of course servicing, just making sure you do your regular service work. And that will save people a lot of money in the long run, which is what we're talking about here. So now I also want to talk to you about the success that you've had as a business owner. It's just impressive. In a field that is dominated by men, you've done a phenomenal job. My understanding is you're #1 Subaru dealership in the country. Is that right?
Yeah.
So, no wonder we have all these Subarus driven around the county. That's great. Now, how did you do that? I mean, what were the things that inspired you? What got you motivated to be so successful? And
I was fired from my job. I was in a male-dominated business working for other car dealers. And I was fired from my job, and I just got really angry about that. And I made the decision that maybe I was just better off to start on my own. And the reason I actually got into Subaru was because when I worked for other dealers, they had a Subaru dealership. And I drove a Subaru. And I was just so impressed with how it handled in the snow. So I actually started selling used Subarus to women because at the time, back in the early 80s, they didn't have all the all-wheel drives that they have today. They had a big like K5 Blazer and like a Bronco, really big trucks, or they had a Audi Quattro, which was a very expensive four-wheel drive. But as far as a reasonably priced all-wheel drive car, there really were none other than a Subaru. And I just felt that it was just such an incredibly great car for women, and especially for me. I mean, I loved it. So as I was selling these cars used, I thought, well, maybe I should get the new car franchise, and then that would enable me to get more used ones coming in. And so I got the Subaru franchise, and I was just so impressed with how much these women loved these cars like I did. So it kind of evolved from there in deciding that really what I wanted to do with my career was provide a haven for women to come to a place where they could not only buy a car that I thought would be just wonderful for them in bad weather, because the difference between men and women in a snowstorm stranded on 490 is a lot different. I mean, men buckle up and decide they're going to, go out in the storm and get to the, to get to their phone or do whatever they have to do. A woman stranded on 490 at night in the wintertime is petrified. And so I just loved the idea of having a vehicle that I knew that where they would be safe, they would be secure, they wouldn't slip and slide, and they would just feel really great about being in our climate here. So it started out that way, and I just became so passionate about the product and what it could do for women that it just blossomed from there. And I think that my passion filtered down to all of my employees, and then we worked on all the different ways we could provide a really comfortable atmosphere for women in the car dealership by having one price selling and round tables and flowers and not pushing them or making them feel that they had to make a decision right away, giving them the time. And I think just word of mouth, people telling people about that experience, is really what made us successful.
That's great.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like part of the reason for that too is your desire to care for people, take care of women and help them out.
It really has never been. It was never about the money. It was always about the helping people. And I think because I worked for other car dealers and I saw how women were treated, how I was treated in other car dealerships, I really wanted to. I just felt compelled, as I told you before the interview started. I could see all these really bright, intelligent women walking into car dealerships with guys they didn't even know because they were afraid to buy a car. And I thought, there's something's really wrong with this. I need to have a place where women can come and feel really comfortable about buying a car.
My view on it, it's kind of schizophrenic because you're looking for a car that you like, that you fall in love with the car, that's why you want to buy it. But then the process is so difficult that you want to have this joy of buying it, but the pain of going through the negotiation in a traditional dealership is so hard that it's so schizophrenic because you want to buy and you have joy, but then you have this pain you go through and then come out with it. So it's just hard. So having the price that's there and just saying that's the way it is, the lowest price you could get, that just makes the experience a lot more fluid. It's just more consistent.
It's very consistent. But what shocks me, Annette, is that it hasn't changed. You would think that in 2006 that other car dealers would be catching on to this, but it hasn't changed since the 50s.
Well,
and I find that incredible. That the same thing is still going on that has been going on since my grandfather was buying cars.
One final question, which is kind of interesting. What happens, traditionally when people go buy a traditional dealership, one goes in and negotiate the car, and then the salesman you're working with usually walks away. Then they come back. What do? Do they have like a donut break or something like that? What really happens when they, before they come back and tell you, well, this is the best price we can offer? What goes on behind the scene?
Well, obviously every car dealership's different, but what happens is, in most car dealerships, the salesperson really doesn't have a lot of information and doesn't know the price that they can sell the car. And there's a sales manager in the background that's really manipulating the system. He's saying to the salesperson, how much more can you get? What's the feel of this customer? Are they going to buy today? And the sales manager is really controlling the deal. And he just keeps sending that salesperson back out sort of as a vehicle in order to see how much more they can get from the customer. Mm-hmm. The philosophy in most car dealerships is that if a salesperson doesn't know that much, he really can't tell the customer that much, and then it's all being manipulated from the back room.
I see.
So there's usually it's a conversation about the psychology of the customer, where the customer is in the process.
I see. Ready to buy, or just easy to just get this price.
Is there, where else have they been? And then the sales manager takes all that information and decides how much more he can actually get from the consumer.
I see. So it's really hard to get the fair price because it depends on your psyche when you walk in and how they're interpreting that and all that. So it's too complicated.
Yeah. That's why you're better off to just know the price before you go in. And then you're in control, and if they won't give you that price, you walk out and you go someplace else. Every car that you love, that you talked about earlier, is available at 3 or 4 locations just in Rochester alone, and with some models and makes 10 locations in the Rochester area. So shop around and make sure that you get the price that you think is fair.
Great, thank you. You've been most helpful. I certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure our viewers did.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us. I'm Nanette Noken. It's About Money, and our guest today is Kitty Van Bortel. Thank you. Until next time.
Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, please email Nanette at nnocon@aol.com. Following production was produced through Penfield Community Television in Penfield, New York.